to the CSCA Montreal chapter. So hello, my name is Joseph Vybihal. I'm a professor in the School of Computer Science here at McGill University. I specialize in intelligent machines and social media. And those two things work together because they both use AI, which is an area that I'm very interested in. Today, I'd like to discuss two topics that my group has been working on, which are documenting the effects of social media and trying to work on techniques to change the algorithms or mitigate the effects of social media. So the whole idea is, how do we improve the social media experience that we are having? So I've divided the talk into three sections. So I want to start off by talking about how is social media unhealthy. Actually, I can do that. And I want to talk about what can be done to make it more healthy. So what would that look like? And then I want to do some biblical reflections at the end. And it is interesting to note that the Bible actually has a lot to say about social media, surprisingly. So Facebook was first launched in 2004, which means that social media has been around for 20 years. And during this period, we have observed various positive and negative effects on society. My talk is focused on the negative effects and how to deal with those effects through both personal habits and changes to the social media algorithms to encourage a more healthier experience. But let us begin by looking at the scope of the problem. We can classify the users of social media into three main demographic categories. They are the youth, the elderly, and adults. And each of these groups is affected by social media in a different way. And each group has subgroups that behave in their own unique ways. So, for example, in the youth category, gender has a great effect on how you experience social media. So even though the subgroup has similarities, there are some differences between these particular subgroups. To understand these categories, we can measure various observed phenomena. Specifically, I'm going to talk about today discrimination, deception, developmental volatility, siloing, and toxicity, which contains things like bullying, anger, bias, and other things. I like this following quote by C.R. Sustin. He is a behavioral economist at Harvard. And the quote goes like this: without shared experiences, a heterogeneous society will have a much more difficult time in addressing social problems. People may even find it hard to understand one another. Social media is very personal. We explore social media alone, mostly on our phones. And we form our beliefs through these unshared experiences. A large concern is the way we construct our worldview in isolation. Are we mature enough to avoid being deceived. So the first thing I want to look at is discrimination, and Joy Buolamwini's excellent book called Unmasking AI is in the libraries. It's you can download it and listen to it even. She developed a new term known as X-coded that describes how some software can cancel your existence. In her book, she describes her experience as a student at MIT learning artificial intelligence. She discovered that the face recognition software did not work on her. She coined the term whiteface when she would put on a mask so the algorithms could see her. She is also an artist, and she created an installation having a TV screen, a camera, and a mask on a desk. If you walked in front of the camera, some beautiful things would appear on the screen. She left it to her audience to figure out why, for some people, they have to put a mask on in order to see those pretty pictures. Machine learning is a particular form of artificial intelligence that learns by showing examples. So you show AI these examples, and it learns from that. And the math behind this technique is simple averages. If you show it a lot of examples of a face, it will learn what the average face looks like. But we can see an immediate problem with this powerful technique. So if I show this technique, this data set, the average face would be more white than dark. And this is the problem that she kind of experienced. And you can see this in these two particular examples over here, that instead of faces, it's just numbers. And you can see over here in group number 1, we have 5, 8, 9, 9, and 9. And if I did the average of that, 5 plus 8 plus 9 plus 9 plus 9 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that gives me 8 as the average. If I take group 2, for example, number 0, 1, 1, 1, 3, and I added them up, divided by 5, the average becomes 1.2. And this average number indicates what the common thing is inside the image. Inside these numbers. It's not an image. Then the number 8 then will represent this person, if you will, which would be just this person here. And to sort of control that, so you can include more people in that, you then have an error term, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2. And so if I do plus or minus 1, for example, this will include 8 and 9, but it won't include 5. In this case, plus or minus 1 would also include 0 and 1, and won't include 3. If I increase this to 2, right, it'll almost include 3 over here. So we have these two properties. One is the average, and one is this kind of range. And so the larger the range, the more things are included inside that average. So if I'm doing an average for criminals, how wide should that range be made? Who will I be including in that set if my range becomes too large? So we have two problems that happen with averaging. One problem with averaging is that the average can average out stuff, That's our first problem with machine learning. We can average things out. And the second problem with machine learning is with this error term, if you increase it to include more people, you might include too much. So this is our first problem. This is connected to discrimination. How you identify people. And she's Canadian, by the way. The other thing is the siloing of thought. The next important concern is the siloing that can occur when using social media. What I mean is that we begin to see only one opinion and are rarely exposed to different or contrary evidence. The artificial intelligence technique used is called the recommendation system, and these are based on your behavior. My group published a paper on the effects of siloing of political discourse on YouTube. Our study first determined how people used YouTube, and then we programmed bots, which are little programs, to log into YouTube and interact with it the way humans do. We gave each bot a political bias, either left or right, and then we watched for the changes in the YouTube feed that was recommended to these bots over time. In the slide, I show you the results of the survey we gave to figure out what bots are like, what the bots should be like. And so these are people that we kind of surveyed, and it's a big, long survey, a big group of people. These are the numbers, what men received, and these are the numbers of that people who identified as women receive. And you can see from this that we're very similar, but we're not exactly the same. So, for example, there were 3 data points which were quite different. B, for example, guys go back to the home page half the time, and women seem to do that 38% of the time. In the case of D, men search 50% of the time, women tend to search 62% of the time, more often. In the case of G, we think that this might have been just an artifact of the population of people that we have, because I don't believe that number. So we're doing more experiments to see if this number comes across. But women watch challenging videos 22% of the time. Guys reported 85% of the time. So we don't know if that's really true or not. So we're kind of wondering about that. But what most people did, so it was a very strong agreement that people watch a video, watch the recommendation, maybe watch another recommendation, possibly watch a third recommendation. But usually we'll go back to the home page and kind of start over again. That's what people tend to do. 1, 2, maybe 3, and go back. So we kind of did this big analysis to kind of figure out what people were like, and then we sent these bots out. And we made like 100 bots, and they stayed on the internet for quite a while. And we got these results. So the slide shows the recommendations over time. This slide shows the recommendations over time. Each graph shows the number of left or right recommendations the bots received on average. The top row shows what the bots experienced as they watched videos and then followed the recommendations. So I watch a video, I follow the recommendation, I follow the next recommendation, I follow the next recommendation. So that's that. And the bottom here is how the home page changed over time. So the home page started like this, because they were new users, these bots. And then over time, their homepage changed. Now, blue means left, Orange means right. And over here you see a left-biased bot. And over time, left became more dominant in their homepage, and right became less and less. Same thing true for right. The right, over time, their feed became more and more containing right content and less left. So the siloing was happening. They were seeing less of the opposing view. There is something else happening here, which I'll talk about later, not right now. But you kind of see this happening. And an interesting side observation is that the experience of a left person is quite strong with very little right, but the experience of a right person and the left kind of is closer for some reason. Not exactly sure what. We were trying to figure that out. The left tends to have a lot of talk shows and comedy kind of talk shows, and we were thinking maybe it was connected to that, but we're still studying this, so we don't really know why this effect was happening. It is reported that people complain that on YouTube that the right has a harder time than the left. So I don't know if this is any indication of that or not, but this just shows this pattern. So an important side effect of siloed thought are the formation of cloistered communities. A cloistered community is an assembly of people who have very little interaction with individuals from outside their group. In the real world, monks and political parties would be an example of a cloistered community. But in social media, this cloistering behavior seems to occur naturally. And by naturally, what I mean is either one, people seek it out, or number two, their recommendation system encourages it, right? And that was what the previous slide showed. You're encouraged over time to only see this content, and so you get cloistered. Other examples of cloistered groups could be religious groups, scientists who never associate with religious people is maybe another kind of cloistered group. Cults of any form, like a personality cult, and conspiracy groups might be a kind of a cloistered group as well. Cloistered groups are characterized by limited interaction with people outside of their group and curated information. Okay, and again, going back here, we're naturally getting curated by this algorithm. Now, developmental volatility is not focused only on the youth, even though the majority of the research has focused on young people. In this talk, I wish to expand the conversation to also include adults, but I'm going to start with this. It is important to notice when the proliferation of social media platforms occurred and when we begin to see mental health issues rise. Facebook started early in 2004, but most of the other social media platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok happened around 2010, 2011, and after. And if you look at the chart, you begin to notice that, in the case of girls, maybe 2011, in the case of guys, maybe 2012, the curve started to increase. And you also notice how girls seem to be disproportionately affected And if you look at the age differences, you see that the only group that was safe up until 2018 were people over 50, probably because they were not using social media, or very little bit. But all the other groups have risen up. Now, why are the young affected so much? According to the Nature Review in Psychology, without looking at social media, the onset or identification of mental health disorders occurs between the ages of 10 to 24, mostly. It happens outside and after as well. It is during this period that young people are most vulnerable to external disturbances. In other words, after the age of 24, the likelihood of developing a mental health disorder decreases. This implies that people need to take care during their adolescence. But this isn't only about young people, this is also about older people. Older people are affected as well. We only need to recall the heated conversations that all of us have had about masking, COVID-19, Trump, and whether scientists can be trusted. Let us look at some statistics that affect adults and the elderly. So this one I find especially interesting. It's a fantastic slide. This is the OSPAM score for how good your memory is. And this is connected to how far away your cell phone is from you. Okay? If it's on the desk, you score under 31. If it's in your pocket or in your bag, you score above 31. If it's in the other room, you score almost 34. Now, this is the error term, so that means that this figure here, this is the average, and it kind of, the lowest number was here and the highest number was here, so there's a bunch of numbers in between here. But you can see that there's a clear increase based on just where your cell phone was located. You also see over here that the people that were scammed the most were 80 and over. 70s didn't do too well, and 60s didn't do too well. Of course, 20s didn't do all that well as well, but still less than people in the 60s. Okay. And over here, this just shows you how much the older people interact with, this is an old statistics, 2013 though. So in 2013, only 41% were not even online. And the other ones were using texting at most. So some of this figure here can be understood as just being not aware of things, so kind of education of the elderly, while this has nothing to do with elderly. This is just our own effects of psychology on us. So the next concern I would like to look at is deception. Although I don't want to focus on it too much. Deception is a form of intentional misrepresentation of information. It concerns people who want to spread misinformation. We can think of this as intentional attack vectors and unintentional attack vectors. An attack vector is a way of presenting information to other people in order to change their opinion. We use the word attack because most often the attack is intentional, but this is not always the case. If someone is biased, they may not realize it and therefore are spreading biased information innocently. A successful attack results in reducing your trust in a source of information, like a person or a thing you originally trusted for truth. Of course, not all sources of information should be trusted, but we are specifically talking about using deception to reduce trust. And I don't really want to look at this too much, but here, for example, this is Facebook, fake news, and just mainstream news. So we're not necessarily classifying the mainstream news. So, but fake news was interacted with more than mainstream news. The last concern that I'd like to look at is toxicity. Toxicity is defined as the quality of being very harmful or unpleasant in a pervasive or insidious way. Things that come to mind are bullying, stalking, and anger, ridiculing, and also self-control issues, to just name a few. On this slide are the results from a CyberGhost survey of 1,000 users. We see similar numbers regularly in other surveys. So, for example, over here, which social media platform has the most cyberbullying? X, then Facebook, and then TikTok, top 3. Ranking social media by apps that show toxicity, Facebook comes first, TikTok second, again, X third. This is kind of a weird comparison, but still the top 3 come out top. And then, how often do you take a break from social media? Well, 36% don't. So 36% of us are always on our social media devices. 5% yearly, and then it goes across. Interestingly, Google offers a tool that can measure the toxicity of text. And it's called Perspective API, and it gives a score. 0.3 and under, it's not toxic. 0.7 and over, it is toxic. In between, we don't know. So can social media be made healthy? So before we move into this topic, what negative effects have you noticed that I didn't cover?
I don't know, we didn't exactly say it's addictive, but
yes.
The addictive quality, it's very easy also to procrastinate, and because it's there.
Yeah.
It's compelling.
Yeah, I didn't talk about that. Yeah, addictiveness.
I suppose it's also like the keeping up with the Joneses or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
where everyone's only showing the best of them, so people feel pressure to keep up with that in their whole life. It's not even possible.
Yes. That's actually a big element. Yes.
I think there's the issue of withdrawal. I'm always afraid that if I decide to cancel my Spotify account, what am I going to do with the music that I've invested in this? Because I used to buy stuff on Apple Music all the time, and I owned it. But now I don't own any of my music anymore. So there's this idea that now I have to keep paying in to remain,
right.
Have that available.
Right. That's good. All right. So can social media be made healthy? So an important note to make before we begin this journey towards healthy practices is to keep in mind that all our solutions have caveats. So what does Joy say? So machine learning can do something called multimodal averaging, which means it can keep track of many averages. We just need enough examples of each average we are interested in. This means 2 things. Either we find a large number of examples that cover all the categories that we are interested in, or we artificially generate examples to cover the missing categories. Today, AI software mix real examples with artificial examples when teaching AI multimodal averages. And so this is kind of what is being showed over here. My data set, I need to teach my AI how to see faces. So I go on the internet and I download faces. Of course, that's a problem by itself, stealing people's faces, but downloading faces. And I download faces that, let's say, have mostly white people in it. Then this is a problem now because my program will only will average out things that aren't there a lot, So what I can do is I can take this face and modify it a little bit and make it a little bit different and fill in the other colors and learn these different averages. So I have a white average, almost white average, darker average, less darker average. I have these different averages now. There is an important caveat here, is what data should we not include in the data set? Religious ideas? Fringe research papers? Should we include everything without restriction? How would this affect the type of information that the AI would know about? And how would it communicate with us differently? Note that if you include all the information without restriction, then this is this situation. And the topics that aren't talked about a lot are going to be averaged out. And so you'll end up with just what the most talked about things are on the internet as the things that you'd have the averages for. But artificial generating examples does help in a strong way to fill in the missing categories. And it's a technique that's used heavily in AI now in order to fill in these missing categories that we are aware of. That's the quote, that's the caveat. If you're not aware that you're missing something, then you're not artificial generating it, and you'll have a bias. All right, there. So, but this is good. This at least addresses issues that we know about, right? So facial recognition, accents, we can kind of do that, and that's good for those things. If you are using this technique to figure out for the police station, criminals, that's a difficult topic to know what categories you should include and what you shouldn't include. What does YouTube do? So this is where the green line comes in. Green line comes in. And so this is also a technique that's used quite often. So YouTube's solution to siloing is to distract you with other content in the hope that you will be led into other spaces. In our study, there is the green line, which exhibits itself in a greater degree than the siloing. We call this the other category, and it consists of everything that was not in the bias, like left or right. This is a common technique in recommendation systems where they attempt to expose you to a lot of random information in the hope that you will broaden your space. To some extent, this doesn't work, as you can see in the chart, because over time, this decreases and this was increasing. Our study didn't go far enough to see whether this actually crosses or becomes parallel. We don't know, but it does decrease. So it works, but maybe not completely. But this is a common technique used today, and we will see it used more intentionally in our next slide. Ground News is a news distribution platform. Has anybody heard of it? Yeah. Okay. It's a pretty good platform that shows you headlines and then provides you a link to the same story from each news source, left, right, neutral, and extreme. The platform also provides statistics like reported percentages. So this was reported only 29% of the time on left media, but 71% on the right media, for example. So they show you percentages. They also do word type analysis. So what kind of words did the right use when describing this? And what kind of words did the left use when describing the same story? They give you these kind of analysis. Where in the world was it reported? So maybe it was only reported in Europe and not in the United States, for example, or in Asia and not in the West. It also does blind spots. So the left is only reporting it. The right is not reporting it. So it's a blind spot for the right, or vice versa. So there's kind of blind spot stuff. And there's lots of other metrics. So here's the caveat. So this is best for people who want to spend time understanding a story. For those people who want a quick news bite, this technique is less beneficial because they don't even want to go here because they don't want to read. They want to see the sound bite. So this is what my group is working on. So my own lab is working on a Chrome extension that, when installed, can interact with the social media platform in various ways to help you manage your experience and maintain your health. This is still experimental and under development, but our idea is to give people control over the social media they consume. We do this in 3 ways. First way is to analyze the things you click. So if you click to watch a video, you click to read something. So once you click, it will provide you with reviews. So like a fact checker. And it provides you with flags. You know, warning, unchecked data, or maybe this has been debunked or whatever. It gives you flags, or from a reliable source. Of course, just saying these words to you is really dangerous because who am I to say that it's a reliable source? But you'll see there's one of the options can help you there. The second thing it does is that it tracks your usage to help you identify your own habits, like times online, how much time you spend online, what things you watch, so it categorizes the things you watch, gives you a percentage. And then it provides you recommendations based on your history on how you can maybe behave more healthy. And the third thing is it gives you control over the Chrome extension. So if you don't like how we're recommending stuff or suggesting, you can adjust it. So you give the user control over the Chrome extension and the social media platform as well. So for example, you can turn off features, you can set a timeout prompt. So if you're on the internet too long, you can say you're on too long. It can filter the recommendations even more than YouTube is filtering. So you can add your own filters on top of the filter that was provided by YouTube. And we're experimenting with a carbon footprint. So the longer you stay, you get to see how much carbon you've been generating as something that's kind of a thing, a thing right now. And you can also remove unwanted content. So, for example, some other features are like a fake news list here, but this is news that you've already watched. So we remember what you watched, and if over time it was debunked, it comes on that list, and you can go see, oh, the video I watched last week has been debunked. It comes on that list. You can also report things, whether it's child abuse, legal issue, whatever. You can kind of identify things, and you can identify that just for yourself, or you can identify it and send it to YouTube, for example, and they have it. Lastly, two other resources that are commonly seen are apps that control your phone and websites that provide counselors when people are in distress. So this 1 Sec app, for example, you can install it on your phone, and it monitors whether you're on social media. And if you're on social media and for too long, it'll turn your screen black, and there's a countdown, and then it'll turn your screen on again. So it gives you this 1 second. It can give you this message. Also, it can say, maybe you should do something else now. And it gives you this opportunity to sort of get out of your trance, right? And there's lots of apps like that. To summarize what we have seen, a healthy social media platform should implement the following. It should present proper self-image, and this is especially true for the young girls. The curve there was a lot related to self-image and keeping up with the Joneses, that kind of thing. Increase your control over the social media app, which seems to be happening a lot now, maybe not on TikTok, but on Facebook for sure. But also help the platform should help you control yourself, right? So it should actually encourage you not to stay on the app. All right, it should give you kind of like some control, kind of like the Chrome extension that we're using, we're trying to build. It should identify and flag things: true, opinion, deception, toxic conversation. Maybe don't go there, So those kind of things. It should do this stuff for sure. Mix your information and mix your social groups, so you're not always talking in your cloistered area. And it should monitor things like bullying, content patterns, and make suggestions for you. Best practices, personal best practices would be things like limit your time online, test the sources of information, just don't believe everything. Don't be hyper skeptical. That's part of what's happening often, is people are so scared to believe stuff. So don't be skeptical is good. Hyper skeptical is not good. Socialize with real people on a regular basis who think differently from you. This is healthy, right? And include printed material, like read a book, right? So other material other than what's coming from social media. So I think it might be surprising, but the Bible has a lot to say about social media. One of the big issues we noted with social media is cloistered groups and learning in isolation. You know when you are in a cloistered group, when you have surrounded yourself with people who only think like you do. The result is experiencing information in a silo. Learning in isolation forces you to evaluate the validity of what you are reading without help from anybody else. And these are great verses over here. So 2 Timothy, for the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but have itching ears, and they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. So our cloistered groups, although this is software doing that maybe instead of us maybe. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together. So not cloistered. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their work. For if they fall, one will lift the other. but woe to him who is alone. When he falls, he has no one else to lift him up. Again, if two are lying together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail, like beat up against the one who is alone, two will withstand him, and three is even better. Right? So this whole idea of cloister, being alone, is not a good idea. The Bible sort of talks about this quite a lot. Another important effect we noticed is the erosion of truth. This is mainly due to the belief in the equality of everyone's opinion. And to some extent this is true, but it breaks down when someone is not informed and continues to communicate with authority. The Bible has something to say about this as well. So here, show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works. And in your teaching, show integrity, dignity, and sound speech, so you cannot be condemned. Not many of you should become teachers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with a greater strictness, for we all stumble in many ways. For by the grace given to me, I say that everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. Right, so we should not be so confident in the things that we say. So the prophet. So a prophet is someone who stands before you, I'm almost done, and either speaks for God or declares what reality is like. The position of a declarer of truth comes with physical consequences according to Scripture when their proclamations are proven to be inaccurate or when they behave inappropriately. In social media, the prophets seem to be free to say anything they want without consequences. The Bible has a lot to say about this as well. So predictions have to come to pass or you get stoned. Glorify God rather than themselves. Do not give their own private interpretations, point out sin, warning of judgment, edify the church, give messages that harmonize with the Bible, have a Christ-like character, are obedient to the will of God. That's the character of a prophet, someone declaring the truth. And on top of that, on our previous slide, there was the not to think of yourself more than you ought, and you'll be judged more, and whatever, right? So I would like to close with the last two ideas. First is the example of Jesus and the Bible. Sometimes the Bible uses commands, but the majority of what the Bible teaches us are through stories, histories, and parables. This is because reality is gray and complex. Social media tends to present reality in black and white terms. This is another area where the Bible has a lot to say about how information should be presented to people. Things may be good and evil, but how we live out the good and evil in our lives is a mixed bag of experiences, actions, and motivations. In terms of social media, we need to notice and take care when social media presents us concise facts that should instead be maybe nuanced. Lastly, I would like to talk about the voice of God. The Bible shows us that God's wisdom comes to us from many directions. So we can see over here, the wind, the Spirit blows where it wishes, and you hear it sound, but you don't know where it comes from or where it goes. For God speaks in one way and in two, though man does not perceive it. And we see lots of examples of how God speaks. Solomon says, "Consider the ants." David says, "The heavens declare your glory." So, a lot of science here. Moses talks about a donkey that talked to a prophet. Job says in dreams and in visions. Paul talks about prophets, teachers, and pastors, and Paul also talks about scripture. And down here, we have ideas of how we should pay attention to these things. So here it says in Mark, pay attention to what you hear. With measure that you use it, it will be measured to you, and still more will be added to you. And then Timothy here says, study to show yourself approved, workman that needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the truth. So this teaches us to listen to many voices. Use your own thinking, be critical, but not overly critical, which might lead to confusion. Thank you. Yes?
Are you familiar with the work of Matthias Desmet, the Belgian author and professor of psychology who wrote about mass formation?
No. I should check that out.
Yes. He's quite current. Matthias Desmet.
Desmet.
I was going to ask about how his concept of mass formation in societies, if you have it, like how that meshes with our current social media.
Yeah, so I don't know mass formations.
Okay. It's a fear. He's basing his work on Hannah Arendt's psychology of totalitarianism, and how there, in an environment of fear, people can be manipulated and respond and be afraid to question. So it's very pertinent.
Yeah. So I didn't study. The only part that kind of connected to that was the left-right politics, but that would go really well with like the COVID-19 and the masks and stuff. Yeah. So I've been focusing mostly on eating disorders, politics, those areas. But, okay, Desmet, right?
Desmet, yeah,
Desmet, okay. Yes.
Yeah, I have kind of a series of observations, and I want to know your reaction to this. I don't like AI, and I mean, largely I teach philosophy. I'd rather avoid it, but I realize, particularly for the younger generation, it's everywhere, and they want to use it. Whatever. So here's my problem: is that even though AI often is used in ways that it tries not to be toxic, but it serves as things that just is not context. It doesn't understand the context. Like, some of my students came to show me like these pictures, historical pictures that were generated by AI, and originally they were too white because that, like, the computer always generated white guys. And then what happened is, in order to try to be more inclusive, it gives you pictures of like Asian Nazis, South Asian female popes, and Black and Asian men at the signing of the American Declaration of Independence, right? So what happens is that it tends to rewrite stuff because it can't understand the context of things. So do we just say, this is just kind of the AI tends to be not necessarily dangerous, but it tends to lead us up the garden path? Is there a way of making it more useful? I prefer to just say, let's just not use it unless we have to. You're a computer scientist. How can you sell AI to me?
I think I think ChatGPT was released too early, because the monetary reason was very encouraging. So it's really still at a very young place. So I'm not going to sell it to you because it has a lot of problems with it. So it's useful in some ways. So you can give it text and it'll summarize. You can ask it certain questions. But I've asked it questions and it just makes up stuff. So when it doesn't know stuff, it just makes up stuff. And a lot of the adjusting that's happening now is kind of like in Joy's suggestion, right? To kind of fill in these gaps. This is what's happening, and this is good in some areas, but not in all areas. And so we're still not sure how to do it right.
Because when we talk about YouTube, I thought it's good that YouTube gives me things that I wouldn't necessarily look at, but sometimes maybe there are things that I shouldn't be looking at. And I'm not talking about pornography or whatever, but like points of view that are they're just not necessary.
Yeah.
And, or, I like to say, look at, spiritual things on YouTube, and it says, "Hey, have you considered this ad from the Church of Satan or whatever?"
Right.
So whatever it might do, it might try to diversify the message, but it might just not be the right place or the right audience to be diversified.
Yeah, and this is something that I bump into all of the time because in this Chrome app that we're kind of building, who am I to say what's the right thing to listen to, right? And so this is the problem that people face. So the current solution is, well, nobody is that authority, and so my take on that is to just flag things, and then hopefully I put enough doubt in your head or whatever, or there's some who was really found to be incorrect, and there's a link there where you can go check it yourself to see that it's incorrect, and that would open up the conversation. Yeah, but it really draws that kind of line of so I've been at a staff meeting where the Presbyterian College, McGill Presbyterian College, is just across the street from the engineering building, and there's a conversation like, why don't we move in there? There's nothing happening there. It's like, it's a Presbyterian. It's a seminary. There's things happening there, right? But so there's this kind of idea that who gets to choose, right? And I don't trust humans enough to do that. I'm not going to trust AI because AI is being trained by humans, so it's not really.
So it seems like we're at the intersection of like the human sciences and technology. And so what came to my mind is that like social processes, like they already happen. The way that we find people who are like us and the way that people around us influence us, the way that when we go to a foreign country that will challenge a belief, like those human processes already happen, and that's like in the domain of sociology and anthropology. Technology seems to make everything happen faster. So, like I could get here by car faster than I could, by walking. When we introduce technology, it can also increase the perils, particularly at the onset, like or at the early stages before it can get protected. So I feel like a lot of it helps me sometimes to take a step back and say, like, actually, the kind of racism that I see on social media actually already exists outside of technology. It's just been microwaved to a good degree, and it is, and we have to seems like we're trying to catch up now to the fact that that's like smoking is dangerous. Spending so much time scrolling is dangerous, and it's like trying to catch up with that. One thing that I am curious about that I would love for you to treat in another setting would be, what are the social benefits of cloistered social interaction? Because when a group of people think and have a like mind about something, it can be to their advantage. So the fact that we might all think that exercising is positive, or eating a certain diet is positive, or that a certain like that racism is bad, or like the fact that we surround ourselves with some like-minded people can have a positive social benefit. So I would be interested in, like, it feels like the concern right now is the risk and danger. So then there's a response. What can we do? How can we understand it better? What can we do? And then also you're engaging the spiritual lens as well. It also fascinates me to think how like cloistered communities contributed to society in great, great ways, spiritually, theologically, and academically.
I totally agree. So like the talk was specifically on the negative impacts and how can we work against it. So that was the talk. I encourage in my classes small groups a lot, because small groups are great venues to study the material, to practice out the material, to live through that material. So cloister groups are really great because there's less distraction. You can interact with 4 or 5 people, and it's a really healthy group. So 100%. But in a classroom, these kind of cloister groups are kind of temporary, and then they move off into maybe other cloister groups, right? And they kind of mix all of the cloister groups. And so a lot of the problems that happen, like with eating disorders, for example, is that you get in a cloister group and you believe that message, and you push out all the other groups and other messages, and that becomes not good. Yes.
You had a point early on relating to the kind of the siloing of thought and opinion, and how it's difficult for society to be sort of coherent and stable. They don't have a common view or common facts to deal with. But how much of that can be undermined if the facts in question are false? Because you can have a situation where some particular group or organization is dominant in one area of thought, and so everyone shares that. But if they're not actually correct, then breaking up into different opinions than that means more people actually have the truth, even though they don't necessarily agree with everyone on what the truth is.
Right.
How do you see that play out?
Right. I think so I'll do a kind of a science idea where scientists will go to a conference and people present papers and they're really passionate about what they're presenting, and I might sit in the audience and I'm going, right, and there's a lot of people doing that. They're like, I'm not buying all of that, right? And so having a venue where you can have this conversation, right? And so over 10 years, we have this kind of conversation. I present my paper, you present your paper, we should see the evidence. Eventually, we convince and change our minds a little bit, and there's this kind of flow. I think that would be a healthy way of dealing with a large group of people with differing opinions. It's really difficult to just say, you need to believe what I believe, right? That's hard. That's a hard sell, right? Unless I don't know, gravity, okay? Right, so that I might be able to convince you that, but otherwise it's a hard sell. Is it the earth bending? Is it quantum mechanics? Like, well, what's happening that's causing the pen to fall? We all agree the pen is falling, right? So there's some things that are easy to do, and other things we have to really struggle with and think about. And you might feel confident for 20 years, and me too, 20 years, but then maybe in the 30th year we're kind of like, oh, well, that part of it was right, and you're like, okay, but that part of it is right, and maybe there's another idea that we can all sort of move towards. So I think fostering that kind of healthy, it's okay that you don't agree with me.
So
you're not evil.
Maybe to his point, it's good that the silos exist as long as the silos talk to each other.
Yeah, and they have to have soft boundaries so that it flows.
The example you gave of cell phones kind of struck me that if it's in the pocket, if it's in the other room, are you saying that my memory retention or just my attention span?
Memory retention increases.
Retention. So are there specific tasks? Because I keep trying to tell my students to put away the phones, right? How can I convince a person that this is actually a problem so that the phone can not be seen as a learning aid, but a learning impediment? Have you noticed this in classrooms?
So there's a study that actually shows that if my phone is outside, but 3 rows ahead of me, your phone is there, my memory thing decreases as well. Okay. So it's the fact that, well, I don't know the answer, but the idea is that we're thinking that it's the beep, it's the light, you're trying to pay attention to the prof, and they're boring, and so the light, and you're kind of like there, you stop listening for a second, you go back, and you have to kind of remember where it was. And so there's these kind of disturbances to attention, and then you have to work at remembering where you were at, and then you're not paying attention.
So it's related to stimulus. It's not related to the mere presence of a machine on the desk, right? It has to be that I'm somehow interacting with it even.
Yeah, so, or the other thing that they say is that you're worried about it, right? So the fact that it's close by, it's like, it's boring. Maybe I should look at my phone, right? Or is it going to ring, right? Or something like that. So there's also some kind of there was also the study. I don't remember it exactly anymore, but where they had a group of people with cell phones turned over, and nobody used. They were told, don't use the cell phone and pay attention to the person speaking. And then they did a memory test. So even then, so there is some kind of memory load that's happening in your head, some kind of concentration that you're putting towards that, even though it's not flashing and not doing anything. There is some kind of attention that you're doing. Yeah.
Has anyone checked on that kind of thing, whether it matters that you leave it outside on purpose or accidentally?
No. So the thing, at least what I saw was intentional activity. Yeah.
I was a little bit confused when you did that example, and I thought you said, I got the impression you were saying it was worse to have the phone out in the...
No, it's better. It's better in the hallway. Yeah. The closer to you, the worse it is. And even if you don't have it, someone else has it, it's also bad.
Have they looked at other stimuli that could mimic that? Like, I know we're waiting for our phone to make a noise, but what if you're waiting for the mailman, or there's a baby in the other room, you're checking mentally if it's crying?
Yeah, so the studies that I there was a series, but it was all in an auditorium setting. So it was it happens when people talk, So really cool. So I think it's kind of late, 8:20. So we'll stop here, and we can go into social time. So I don't want to eat all those Timbits, so please have some Timbits, and we can talk.